Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. So this is a competitive Archfiend deck for the July, or pretty much August 2021 format. It's been a while since I've made a deck profile, so I think it's high time that we update the one that I had previously. So we may as well get right into it. There'll be a couple of cards that you can basically take out and put other cards in depending on your preference, depending on if you want to make the deck a little bit stronger or not, and obviously that racks the price up a little bit. In addition to that, there'll be some combos and everything that I'll be going over, and then some general guidance on different matchups with this deck. So to begin with, we have 23 monsters. So we have 3 Archfiend Emperor, First Lord of Horror. Goes without saying, this is probably one of the strongest Archfiend monsters in the game, so it can summon itself. For free, right? You don't have to tribute any monsters, but its attack gets halved and it can pop cards on the field, and then at the end of the turn it blows itself up. Now you can cut it down to 2, but having 3 is quite beneficial sometimes because you can basically do this combo that brings out all 3 of him, and then you can pop basically 3 cards on the field, and then you can just attack directly for basically an OTK. Then we have an Archfiend Empress. So Archfiend Empress is one of the strongest Archfiend cards in the game as well. They go hand in hand with each other. She has a non-once per turn revival effect, so whenever she dies, she gets to bring out a level 6 or higher Dark Fiend type monster from your graveyard, which is pretty strong. So normally that's Archfiend Emperor, and her on-field effect protects your other fiends from being destroyed. So basically if one face-up Dark Fiend type monster is going to be destroyed by whatever means, then you can just remove a fiend from your graveyard instead. So monsters like Tour Guide, for example, you're not going to use them again, so just banish them. And happy days. People don't tend to read Empress's effects, so they tend to try and blow things up and don't quite realise that your monsters don't die. And also, that's not once per turn either, so you can just keep protecting your monsters, keep reviving them as well. Really, really solid card. But it's also a bit of a brick. Then the other level 8 monsters that we play, so we run 1 Cursed Necrophyr, so this is another good... So we run 1 Cursed Necrophyr, another good Archfiend Empress target. So Cursed Necrophyr allows itself to be revived from the grave when it's destroyed, and then when it is destroyed and revived, it can pop cards on the field depending on the number of face-up spell or trap cards that you have. So normally in this deck you tend to have 2 or 3 sometimes, so that's like 2 or 3 cards that you get to pop at the end of the turn. Really decent. So yeah, great card to have. And it also has its own special summoning effect where you just get 3 of your banished monsters, shuffle them into the deck, and then you can bring it out. So it's quite a nice extender in that sense. Then we also have Abominable Unchained Soul. So this monster, if a card you control is destroyed, special summon it from the hand, discard a card, and then pop a card on the field. So it doesn't target either, so it's really useful in that regard. And it also has 3000 attack. And also, if it gets destroyed, you can special summon it back again, as long as it wasn't the turn that it was summoned as well. So it's a decent card. Empress can revive it, but also it's an Unchained card. So there are a couple of Unchained cards that we use in this deck, and we'll go over that in a bit later. We have Unchained Soul of Disaster, so once again Empress can revive him. He also has this nice effect where he can basically link off monsters your opponent controls and using him as well to bring out something even stronger. So it's got some decent disruption there. We play the Dark Spirits, so we can just play 1 of each for now. So we've got Dark Spirit of Banishment and Dark Spirit of Malice, so they bring out level 8 fiends from the grave. One is due to card effect, the other one is basically a battle trap, and they also recycle themselves whenever a fiend gets hit and sent into the graveyard. So they're really useful. Playing 2 of each is also quite beneficial in case they get banished, but 1 of each is just fine. And then to continue with that Unchained engine, so we have 3 Unchained Twins Aruha and then 2 Sarama. So they play off each other fairly well. So Aruha can special summon itself by popping cards on the field. Sarama can bring cards back from the grave and then pop cards as a result. So fairly decent. Then we have 3 Fiendish Rhino Warrior. So Rhino Warrior is probably one of the best Fiend type supports in the game. A level 3 Earth Fiend, and when it's sent to the graveyard, it gets to send a Fiend from your deck to the grave. And if it happens to be on the field, it protects your Fiend type monsters from battle and card effects. So it's really, really strong. It's one of your main setup cards, right? You can use it with Tour Guide, you can use it with Void Apocalypse, and we'll go over some of those combos a bit later. Play 2 Tour Guide, you can bring this up to 3 if you want to. Tour Guide we're not super reliant on, right? So normally it is basically an Ash target. You don't want your entire turn ending from an Ash Blossom onto a Tour Guide. So it is really powerful. You could easily take away another card in this deck to bump that up, but 2 is just fine. Then we play 2 Archfiend Heiress. And Archfiend Heiress is one of the main searches in the deck, but its search effect is really clunky, so it has to be sent to the graveyard by a card effect, and if it's in your hand, that's a problem. right? You can't use Void Apocalypse to dump it because that's for cost. So we play 2 of it because we don't want to have it in our hand during the opening turn. We want to dump it from the deck into the grave and then recycle it through Master King, Archfiend, and basically have more copies that way. So you could bump it up to 3, but I find that 3 is good, but you tend to brick with it. It's kind of weird, bricking with the search, but it is what it is. So I just run it at 2. And then we play 2 Scum, so you don't need 3 of this. Scum just helps you search a Dark Spirit, or it helps bring a tour guide into your hand. So all in all, it's pretty decent. It also has some synergy with Rhino Warrior as well. If you draw both of those, you can summon them both, and then either link off or exceed into like Dante or something. So yeah, great card, but it's not super essential in the opening hand. Right. Then for the spells and traps, so we've got 10 spells and we've got 7 traps. And then at the end of the main deck segment, I will explain some cards that you could replace. So we'll open up with 3 Dark Spirits Mastery. Could be played at 2. Basically, you discard a card, bring a level 8 Fiend from your deck or graveyard into your hand. So it's really good at recycling stuff. You could, if you wanted, just dump a level 8 Fiend and then bring it back, and then that will recycle your Dark Spirits. But basically, if you've got a Rhino Warrior in your hand and a Void Apocalypse, for example, then you want to dump the Rhino Warrior to search for, say, an Empress, and then you get Rhino Warrior's effect, and then you can use Void Apocalypse to dump the Empress that you just brought into your hand. So it's basically a way to bring cards into your hand just to dump them. And also, if, say, for example, Cursed Necrophir is in your graveyard, or an Archfiend Emperor, then that's a nice way to bring them back, and that gives you an extra way to recycle your Dark Spirits as well. Then we play 3 Abomination's Prison. Very decent card. Its set effect when it gets destroyed is great, but ultimately you're going to search for Aruha, or you're going to search for Abominable Chamber of the Unchained, depending on which one you don't have, and then that will start your combo. 1 Foolish Burial. Send a card into the grave is basically what we need. The whole ethos of an Archfiend deck is to dump stuff into the grave and then bring them back out again. So Foolish Burial is great. Void Apocalypse is another Foolish Burial, and if you get rid of Fiendish Rhino Warrior, then that's 2 Foolish Burials in 1 card. Void Apocalypse is also searchable by Void Vanishment, so if you wanted to add that in as like an extra tech, maybe at 2, then you're also welcome to do that. And then for the traps, we have 1 Archfiend's Roar, so it's searchable, and it's also great because it destroys your monster at the end of the turn. So if you bring back an Empress, for example, it will just replace itself, and then it will also recycle your Dark Spirits. So you actually plus off of this card. It's pretty good. All for 500 life points. We play 2 Fiend Griefings, so like I say, if you want to get rid of Dark Spirits Mastery, you could bring that down to 2, bump Fiend Griefing up to 3. It is a good card. It is a fantastic disruption card, especially against decks like Eldritch or Shaddoll, for example. Just spin those cards back into the deck, and then you get to dump a card of your own, so you just plus off of it. It's great. Abominable Chamber of the Unchained, so that is basically a Call of the Haunted, or it can summon cards from your hand. You can do that, but most likely what you're doing with it is popping it through Aruha to start your Unchained combo. And then we have 1 Call of the Archfiend. You can also bump that to 2, but this is a great continuous trap, which basically always revives your Archfiend Empress or your Archfiend Emperor. Basically any fiend that you want in this deck it can bring out. So that's the main deck. There are cards that you could add in, for example, the Dragoon package. Yeah, so it's very strong. You're adding bricks into the deck, so you already have quite a few bricks, so you kind of have to be careful with that, but the power trade-off is quite large. So for example, the Dragoon package that you run can be very minimal, right? It's just literally Dark Magician, Red Eyes Fusion, and Red Eyes Black Dragon, right? So you can just get rid of the Dark Spirits Masteries, and then that's what you have. Other powerful cards that are kind of not in engine, for example, you could just run 2 Eldritch the Golden Lord, so you discard quite a lot in this deck, so you could just get rid of Eldritch, you do whatever you need to do, and then you just bring Eldritch back again. You can even use him to send cards as well, so it's also quite powerful. You can get rid of Fiend Griefing or Archfiend's Roar for those kinds of cards. But if you wanted to keep it more pure but still fairly powerful, then you can run a deck like this. You may also want to run like a second Empress, or maybe cards like Allure of Darkness or Falling Down as well. So this deck is for going first, and Falling Down is more of a going second card, so that's why I don't run it. But if you wanted to do a more going second variant, then for sure you want to put something like Falling Down in, because it's basically Shaddoll. Right, that's the main deck. So the extra deck, people. So like I say, if you're running the Dragoon package, you're going to want to run Verte Anaconda, but if you're not running the Dragoon package, then just get rid of that and replace with literally whatever you want. You might want to have a third Unchained Soul of Rage, right? there's this great tech card called Battling Boxer Cheat Commissioner, which means that your opponent has to attack all of your monsters, right? They have to attack if able. So that's really good for basically forcing a Dark Spirit of Banishment revive, and that's going to almost guarantee that you're going to pop their monsters as well, so it's really good. He also has another card effect as well. If he happens to get attacked, you just detach materials, look at their hands, now you've got their hand knowledge, and then if they have a spell, you just set it to your side of the field. So that's quite a nice piece of disruption. Most likely at that stage in the game, it's probably not going to matter that much because they've done everything they need to do, so you just use it for the attacking basically. But other than that, so we play Zeus, you can bump that up to 2, you can do that quite easily in this deck. Zombie Stein, it's a beta to get rid of Dragoon basically. Dingirsu is probably the best rank 8 in the game in my view. So you can summon it, you can send stuff straight to the grave, and then it also just protects your cards for as long as it has materials, so it's really good. We run Beatrice, so there's a nice combo that you can do if you happen to have Tour Guide and Scarm in your hand. You want to use Tour Guide, summon Dark Spirit of Banishment for example, or a Fiendish Rhino Warrior, go into Dante, use Dante's effect to mill some stuff, and then if you dump a level 8 Fiend, the Dark Spirit monster will be recycled. So what you want to do is summon Tour Guide, summon Fiendish Rhino Warrior, go into Dante, detach the Rhino Warrior, dump 3 cards, then you want to dump a level 8 Fiend, so like Empress for example, into the graveyard, discard the Scarm, go into Beatrice, at the end of your turn, get a Dark Spirit into your hand so you can recycle that monster, and then you also get a Foolish Burial on your opponent's turn. So basically Beatrice sets you up with everything that you need, and if it happens to get destroyed, you're also welcome to play Dante Pilgrim of the Burning Abyss as well, so that fusion monster, so just as an extra floating extending card basically. We play a Nightmare Shark, so that's quite a cheesy card where you just go into it, swing for 2000 damage to try and end the game, but also you can swing for that amount and then go into Zeus if the game carries on from there on out, so it's quite a decent card. Dante, like I just said, right, it mills cards, which is not the most reliable thing in the world, it's a bit RNG, but it allows you to go into Beatrice, and also it lets you recycle your Scarm as well. And then we have a bunch of link monsters. So like I say, we play Unchained in this deck, so we play Unchained Abomination, we've got 1 Soul of Anguish, and then we have 2 Unchained Soul of Rage. And then the other link monsters, so we've got Cherubini, which is pretty essential for the deck to function, yeah, and then we have Master King Archfiend, Nightmare Unicorn, and then Topologic Zerovorus as well. Okay, now, that's the deck in a nutshell. So there's quite a few different combos that you can do with this deck, and I've started to compile a spreadsheet which effectively goes over those combos. So it's a work in progress, but I'll just show you some of the stuff that this deck can do. So we'll start off with a 5-card combo, since that's the least consistent, and it's 5 cards because if you don't open all of the cards, then you kind of need to search through a few things. And also, just throwing it out there, we use Unchained monsters because the first turn of Archfiends isn't the strongest, so we use Unchained to basically give us a decent first turn with some form of interaction on the opponent's turn. So completely uninterrupted, what you do is you summon good old Tour Guide, activate Tour Guide's effect, and a special summon some sort of Dark Spirit monster. I tend to go for Banishment because that gives you some form of control of when you activate it, right, and it can catch your opponent by surprise. People tend not to go into battle traps so much. Okay, so you've got both of these on the field, then you want to link those away into Cherubini. Cherubini, like I say, one of the best cards. So activate Cherubini's effect, and we're going to get rid of Scarm. So that's going to be quite important, and you'll see why. So, done all that, activate Void Apocalypse. Void Apocalypse effect, you're going to discard Fiendish Rhino Warrior, like I was mentioning earlier. We now have 2 Foolish Burial effects. So what we're going to do is send an Heiress into the grave. Then both of those will activate, depending on which one you want to activate first in case you get some sort of interruption. For this demonstration, it doesn't really matter. Activate both of these effects. Fiendish Rhino Warrior is going to send Archfiend Empress into the graveyard. And then you're going to search off of Heiress, Call of the Archfiend. Okay? Now, Dark Spirit of Banishment's effect is going to activate, so let's just recycle that. Boom. And now we get to go through some sort of Unchained play. So let's set Abominable Chamber of the Unchained. Then we're going to activate Aruha by popping Chamber of the Unchained. Make sure you don't put it in a position where Cherubini is protecting it. So let's just summon Aruha, Abominable Chamber's effect is going to activate, so that way we're going to bring out Sarama onto the field. Sarama's effect is going to set Abominable Chamber of the Unchained, and then we're going to pop Aruha. Aruha's effect is going to activate, which is going to bring out Abominable Unchained Soul. We're not going to activate his effect. And then we're going to link both of them off into Unchained Soul of Rage. We can just bring that into this protection zone here. That's perfectly fine. So now we could go into other cards if we want to, but we're not. Instead, we're going to set Call of the Archfiend. Then we're going to end our turn. Skarm's effect is going to activate. Now this is the important part. We have to bring Archfiend Heiress into our hand. So, we've got Unchained Soul of Rage on our side of the field, and then we have these two cards in our hand. So the really important thing now, so the optimal order you want to activate cards in is Call of the Archfiend first. So let's activate Call of the Archfiend. This will bring Empress back from the grave. When we do that, we are going to discard Heiress, summon Empress, and then Heiress's effect will activate, which will allow us to search for Archfiend Emperor. Now, let's say they normal summon Tour Guide, and then they activate Tour Guide's effect, and that's going to special summon Dark Spirit of Malice. I don't know. Okay, because they've done that, now we'll use Unchained Soul of Rage's effect to link off with that Dark Spirit. So that's one interruption, and then we're going to go straight into Nightmare Unicorn. With Nightmare Unicorn's effect, activate it, and then here we're going to discard our Dark Spirit of Banishment to spin one of their cards back into the deck. So that's two interruptions. Then we can activate Abominable Chamber of the Unchained to bring back Abominable Unchained Soul. His effect will activate, we discard the Emperor, and then we get to pop a card. And that will allow us to recycle our Dark Spirits. Now we've still got our Dark Spirit in hand, we've got Empress on the field, we've got Unchained Soul on the field, and then we also have Emperor in the grave to recycle off of our Empress. First of all, Empress is also protected by Cherubini, so they have to get rid of Cherubini first. And if they happen to get rid of all of that, then we can use a Dark Spirit of Banishment to bring Empress back, and then we have yet another floating monster. So a good thing to keep in mind is that Archfiends really excel at summoning on your opponent's turn. That's basically the whole point of them. So it's really difficult sometimes for your opponent to realize when it's actually game, because you can just summon so many times on their turn, so that sometimes they completely blunder and they summon things and they try to go for like an OTK with, I don't know, Boral Sword Dragon or something, and then you bring out Archfiend Empress and then they realize, I can't actually win. And then on your turn you can do what you want. So I like to differentiate the true body count that you have on the field versus the relative body count. So with that 5-card combo, the true body count is like 4, but the relative is 7. So you can summon up to 7 monsters on your side of the field, and that makes it really difficult for your opponent to get over. So I'll just show you another combo. So what you want to do is normal summon Tour Guide. Again, you know, it's quite susceptible to Ash Blossom, but assuming they don't have Ash Blossom, you can normal summon him. We are going to search for Skarm, summon that onto the field. Then we'll link off into Cherubini once again. So Skarm's going to get its effect at the end of the turn. We'll activate Cherubini's effect, send Fiendish Rhino Warrior. Get some nice little attack boost, that's lovely. Activate Fiendish Rhino Warrior's effect, and that is going to send Archfiend Empress into the grave. It can actually be any level 8 Fiend, but Empress is preferred. Okay. Now we activate Abomination's Prison, and Abomination's Prison is going to search for Abominable Unchained Soul. Set Call of the Archfiend. Then we're going to end our turn, and then Skarm's effect is going to activate, and then that can bring, for example, Archfiend Heiress. And on their turn, we can activate Call of the Archfiend. That's going to bring out Empress. So we get rid of Heiress, special summon it, and then we get to search for Archfiend Emperor. So, with all that said and done, if our Empress happens to get destroyed, then we can special summon Abominable Unchained Soul onto our side of the field, and then we can discard Emperor in order to disrupt their plays, and then we can also then use Dark Spirit of Banishment, revive Archfiend Empress, and then that can also float again into Archfiend Emperor. So the relative count there is also pretty high. So what we can do here, this is just like a 3-card combo, right? We can just summon Tour Guide, activate Tour Guide's effect, summon a Dark Spirit, for example, and then we link off into Cherubini, and then Cherubini's effect is going to send Rhino Warrior, and then that will allow you to send Archfiend Empress, which will recycle your Dark Spirit. So we'll just get rid of that, bring that into your hand, and now we've still got Abominable Chamber of the Unchained, so we can set that, activate Aruha's effect by blowing that up, summon, then activate Abominable Chamber's effect, and that's going to bring a Sarama onto the field. And then Sarama can set a Abominable Chamber, and then we can pop Aruha, and then Aruha is going to summon Unchained Soul. So, two things you can do here. If you have a level 8 Fiend in your hand, like Emperor for example, you can use Abominable Unchained Soul's effect, discard that Emperor, destroy Sarama, and then go into Unchained Soul of Disaster. That's really good on your turn, because then you can use that as additional disruption, and then that will also allow you to go into something like Unchained Abomination. We don't have that, so we're not going to activate its effect, and instead we can link those off into Unchained Soul of Rage. And then this will give you some interruption on your opponent's turn. Unchained Soul of Rage is deceptively powerful, ladies and gentlemen. So now we've got 2 level 8s in the grave, and we can also bring it back with Abominable Chamber of the Unchained and also Dark Spirit of Banishment. So although we have a true body count of 2, the relative body count is like 4 or 5, so it's fairly decent. Another nice combo that you can do, so for example you can set Abominable Chamber, and then you can activate Aruha's effect, so destroy that. So this is the standard Unchained combo that you do, right? Activate Abominable Chamber's effect, and we're going to summon good old Sarama onto the field. Sarama's effect, going to set Unchained Chamber and destroy Aruha. Aruha's effect is going to activate, and then we're going to summon Unchained Soul. Now we'll normal summon Fiendish Rhino Warrior, and then we'll link Fiendish Rhino Warrior and our Sarama into Master King Archfiend. Now Master King Archfiend's effect basically allows you to recycle your Archfiends forever. So with Fiendish Rhino Warrior, so now the choice is basically up to you. If you have a level 8 Fiend in your hand, you want to send a Dark Spirit into the graveyard so that you can recycle it later. If you don't, then what you can do is send Heiress, and then you want to chain link 1 Heiress and then chain link 2 Master King. So that way, if they happen to have an Ash Blossom, they can't Ash it because Master King has basically blocked it. And that will allow you to get a free search, and most likely as well, Master King will send the Heiress back into your deck. So now you've got another copy of Heiress for another search. Now you can bring whatever you want. So let's just bring Empress, shall we? Now that Master King has done his job, so we can just link those off into good old Unchained Soul of Rage. And now we've got one disruption here into Unicorn, which is 2, and then Abominable Chamber, which is 3. There's quite a number of other combos that you can do, and it's all still a work in progress, so I encourage you to sort of play around with the deck so that you can figure out other combos that this deck is capable of. So now just some quick matchup guidance against the good old meta decks. So Archfiends are quite capable of defeating meta decks, contrary to popular belief, simply because not many people play Archfiends in any sort of competitive setting. They are fairly decent. I would say they're fairly decent at sort of rogue status deck. They're quite capable of beating decks such as Prank Kids, Sky Strikers, Altergeist, Shaddolls for example, any sort of Dogmatica type deck. Archfiends fare fairly well against them, simply because you have quite large beaters, and by the time your opponent has popped everything, you still have Dark Spirit of Banishment in your hand to take care of stuff. Having said that, obviously it's not a meta deck, right? There's still some parts of it that without new support is going to get hit pretty hard against the meta. In particular, decks like Drytron. Any deck that negates, which is the meta, effectively, you're going to have a hard time dealing with. So Dragon Link, which isn't used too much anymore, but is still quite strong, and Drytrons in particular with Herald of Ultimateness is going to give you a really hard time. But having said that, there's some things that you can do to basically combat them. So Sky Strikers, fairly easy to beat with Archfiends. So the cards that you want to look out for are Shark Cannon, because that can banish your cards or special summon it to their side of the field. If they don't read and they special summon Emperor, they screw themselves over because that locks them into Fiends. So happy days on your part. But ideally, you'll want to respect the Shark Cannon so that you can basically keep monsters in your graveyard or on your side of the field. So always have a Dark Spirit of Malice on hand, have a Call of the Archfiend in the grave, and just make sure that they don't keep recycling it off of like multi-roll. So just hit the multi-roll and respect the Shark Cannon, and it should be a fairly easy match. So even with Shizuku's minus 100 attack for each spell, because your monsters have such high attack anyway, it rarely matters unless it's super late game. And also the higher tier combo with Mystic Mine, if they're running that variant, doesn't hurt you too much because you can link into Master King and then just not pay his maintenance cost, and then you've equalized the board state. You still have Dark Spirits to special summon, so it's all happy days. But of course, side deck options, you're gonna want to run cards like Imperial Order, that just completely kills their deck. You can even run, for example, Chaos Hunter to stop cards from being banished, so that way their Shark Cannon does nothing to you. Widow Anchor is also deceptively strong, being able to take your cards. Negating doesn't matter that much because Dark Spirits negate anyway, and you're going to be using Banishment more often than not to basically get rid of their link monsters and force them to go into fray to basically burn that special summon. Shaddolls are... it's either easy or intermediate. If they're playing a trap version of the deck, it's very difficult because most likely they'll run Ice Dragon's Prison and screw you over completely. You have to really respect the Ice Dragon's Prison and use cards like Cursed Necrophyr later in the game so that you can recycle your banished monsters. In addition to that, the real powerhouse that Shaddolls have against Archfiend decks is Neo Shaddoll Ariel, which banishes 3 cards from the graveyards. Unbelievably strong. It will kill you so quickly if you don't respect it. If you're against Shaddolls, just know that they're probably playing at least 2 of this thing. Wait for them to use it, then start dumping your cards and then win that way. Because to be honest, monsters like El Shaddoll Winder that restrict you to summoning once, it doesn't matter because chances are you're just going to summon Empress anyway, and then off of Dark Spirit of Banishment, that will probably kill the Winder, and then you just unlock your other special summons. But again, this isn't a combo deck where you summon loads of monsters. You know, you don't have to summon everything that you need and bring out a bunch of negates in order to win. El Shaddoll Winder does nothing. El Shaddoll Construct as well, so that also doesn't really do anything, so it can pop cards, but that benefits you. But also you can redirect attacks with Dark Spirit of Banishment, so if it's a direct attack, Construct's effect won't activate. But if it's not a direct attack, you just summon Empress, both of them will die, and then Empress will replace herself with like Emperor, for example. Or Abominable Unchained Soul, then you get an additional pop. So Schism is a good card to look out for because it can just send cards to your grave, so make sure that you've got a healthy amount of Dark Spirits, cards like Call of the Archfiend ready, and also make sure that you can set yourself up next turn with an Emperor, so getting rid of an Heiress to search it, and then get rid of Schism that way. Lots of recyclability with that deck. It is really strong, but it's not the hardest matchup in the world against Archfiends. Prank Kids is a grind game, so it's grind versus grind, but the good thing about Prank Kids is that they don't sit on a ton of negates, so it's actually one of the more balanced decks that you could fight, and even though it's really strong in the meta, it's not so strong against Archfiends. So they can pump out a bunch of monsters. They can pump out that Battling Butler monster, which can basically double Raigeki you, or sometimes triple Raigeki you. Doesn't matter because your monsters benefit from being destroyed anyway, and it's only got like 3000 attack as well, so you can just use an Emperor and crash into it. That's basically the main combo of their deck, is just to bring out that monster and then pop your monsters, but who cares. The cards to look out for are Weather Washer, so that stops you from activating your Dark Spirit during the battle phase. It will kill you off. Luckily, not many people go into that all the time, they just use that as some sort of extender. It's not the worst thing in the world, but it is something to be concerned about. In addition to that, Prank Kids decks tend to sit on Totally Awesome as pretty much as their negate disruptor. So if you can get past that as well, it's not too bad. They don't really use Dragoon either. They sometimes go into cards like Avramax if they want to, but like Dragoon tends not to be run in a Prank Kids deck, so you're pretty much safe. It's a really, not easy deck, but it's a simple enough matchup that you shouldn't have too much of a hard time on. It will just go on for a while. You'll probably win on turn 15 or something. Altergeist, ladies and gentlemen, the #1 negating deck in the game in my view, apart from Drytron obviously. So Altergeist is really frustrating. It's really difficult. It's hit and miss. It's very hard to win against Altergeist as Archfiends. If you can get rid of Silquitus early, then it's not too bad. But if you get stuck where they summon it, or even a second one, then they're going to be bouncing cards back into your hand all day long, and you just don't have the firepower to pump out more cards than it can bring back. So you need to deal with that early. Other monsters are fairly easy to deal with, so like Meluseek, for example, can attack directly and send, but you have banishment to protect you, and then that can just blow it up, so that's not too bad. Altergeist Protocol is definitely a card, so stopping their monsters from being negated. So cards like Skill Drain are just not going to cut it against Altergeist, so it is a grind matchup. You have to deal with the Silquitous in order to win. If you don't deal with that, it's game over. And then we have Drytrons. 90% of the time you're going to lose against Drytrons, but in the side deck game, if you summon monsters such as Koaki Meru Doom, normal summon that, pass, you're probably going to auto win. Just look at the short that I made to prove it. So Koaki Meru Doom negates all dark and light effects during the main phases, and Drytron can't do anything as a result of that. They can't get over 1700 attack because they can't summon anything. So you summon Doom and then you win. You can side that in. You can side, for example, Diamond Core to search it, and Diamond Core also allows your Koaki Meru to be protected as well from destruction, so that's not too bad. Other cards like Imperial Order can help. Skill Drain, Summon Limit. Basically it's a side deck game. If you can side effectively against Drytrons, you can probably win. If not, they will summon Herald of Ultimates every time, and you will lose. Eldritch, Fiend Griefing stops it. They try and summon Eldritch the Golden Lord, you just Fiend Griefing it back into the deck, slows them down quite considerably. It's not too difficult to beat Eldritch. They sit on Golden Lord, which can have over 3000 attack, or it's not. But to be honest, you float a bit more effectively with your Dark Spirits and Empress. So it's basically a grind matchup, getting over that card. They're sending their traps into the grave basically every turn to bring it out. So eventually you'll get over it because they'll run out of resources, and then you can push for game. So it's one of those grind matchups. They do have Wakiero, and that's a problem because that banishes cards from the graveyards. So if they're a good Eldritch player, they'll prioritize that over Conquistador and start banishing your monsters from the graveyard. If they do that, you will be pretty screwed. So make sure you have Dark Spirit of Malice on hand, or say Call of the Archfiend or Archfiend's Roar to kind of disrupt that play. But in general, it's one of those grind matchups, yeah. Another thing to look out for is you don't want 2 Eldritch on their side of the field, because since it's a grind matchup, your life points are going to be fairly low. And if they exceed into Super Dreadnought, then they'll burn you for 2k damage, and then you'll most likely lose off of that. So you don't want to lose off of that cheesy type play. You want to win by pushing past their Golden Lords with your Empress and everyone like that. So don't let them have 2 on the field. Keep up the pressure and you should be fine. Ignister. So Ignister aren't too bad. They're crazy in terms of the amount of combos they can do. They can summon for days, and their field spell lets them summon even more. It's absolutely bonkers, absolutely insane. But again, it's one of those things where like your opponent can do things all day long. They can summon a bunch of cards, but they still can't get rid of Dark Spirit Banishment. So their Link 5 is really strong. If they bring that onto the field, you're going to have a tough time. You can side Kaijus to get over it. Lava Golem is decent because Dark Spirit's Mastery can search it, so that's a nice way to get over it. Another boss monster they tend to use is that Firewall Dragon Dark Fluid. So basically that card gets tokens, and then they can just negate as long as they have tokens on that monster. So Dark Fluid's pretty strong. It's not horrendous, particularly if you do some sort of Emperor combo of trying to pop with each one. You can slowly burn through the amount of tokens that they've got. So it's not the end of the world fighting Ignister, but it can be a problem if they bring out their Link 5, so just make sure you have something like Lava Golem sided so that you can take care of it. There's not many other decks to talk about really. I might do a different video on this to explain matchups in more detail with Archfiends. I suppose other decks like Phantom Knights, for example, particularly the Dark Rebellion, like OTK variants, they tend to bring out a monster that negates and then a monster that can attack by absorbing all the attack of every other monster and then swing for game. So a great way of getting over that is just by baiting the negate with Dark Spirit of Malice, and then when they attack you just activate Dark Spirit of Banishment and then they can't OTK you. So happy days. And then next turn you just deal with all that situation. Yeah, so I might do another video explaining matchups, but I just thought with this deck in particular, there's quite a few things that you can do against the meta, particularly the Unchained Disruption in the early game, so that you have your grind matchup with the Archfiends in the mid and late game. So that about wraps it up, ladies and gentlemen. If you enjoyed this video, my name's Adam, if you don't, my name's Steve, and if you want to see more Archfiend related duels, reviews, combos and discussions, then feel free to have a browse and hit subscribe so that you can see more of this content when it gets released, and hit the notification bell so that you get notified when the content gets uploaded. And until next time, ladies and gentlemen, I'll see you around.